So next up, we have a senior manager over learning design and development at Volvo and Mack Trucks. Please welcome Amanda Clarida.
Yeah. Chris, very well.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Technical difficulties. Still good? All right, good. I think I'm loud enough anyway. So thank you guys for being here. It's late in the afternoon, but definitely going to keep the conversation going about training and development. I do believe in training, Brad. This is my bread and butter. I studied training and development in college. I figured out it was the only thing that I knew how to do. And thankfully, I've been able to make a living at it for the past couple decades or so. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is the belief or the impression that XR, whether it's VR, AR, or whatever, is just another authoring tool. It's just another option for training. I do believe that it can enhance training, but I don't think that we can just replace one thing with another. You cannot just replace an e-learning, for instance, with a virtual reality experience and think that you're going to have the same experience or the same results. It's just not a one-for-one kind of thing when we talk about authoring tools. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the considerations for training and development and maybe talk to you guys about that, have some sort of conversation, some interaction, I hope, and get some thoughts and what you guys are working on as well. How many people in here actually work in training and development? Yay. Thank you. Good job. So you guys are probably familiar with ADDIE, right? Yes, ADDIE, SAM, all that good stuff, which is a methodology for training and development. And for a long time, I've been getting these kinds of questions. If you were here yesterday, I think it was the keynote speaker, one of those gentlemen said, you don't want to start with, wouldn't it be cool if? Those are the kinds of questions that I get. Hey, Amanda, wouldn't it be cool if we could just do this? Hey, wouldn't this be sexy? That's what I hear all the time. My boss says that all the time. Amanda, this is good, sexy work. I'm not really, I'm not looking for the sexiest new thing. I'm still very much focused on what is going to help us meet our objectives. Okay, I still go through the ADDIE process and I start with analysis as much as possible. These days we have some very intense development expectations. You know, people want what they want now, and so it doesn't really facilitate the entire process as lengthy as it should be. We don't really have the opportunity to dig as deep as we need to all the time, but we do our best. And like I said, still always want to start with that that assessment. The problem that I have is about really understanding why we're not using VR. Do we even really know what VR is? My boss says VR for everything. He doesn't know what AR is or what XR is or what the concept of mixed reality is. I don't really think he cares. He just wants me to use something that is in a virtual environment so that we can add that to our repertoire and say we have a really truly blended learning solution available. So awesome. I would like to do it the right way still. I'd like to keep trying to do it the right way, or at least the rightest way, right? There's a lot of different right answers, a lot of different right solutions that's going to work for you depending on who your audience is, what your objectives are, what your business is, your bottom line, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Find the rightest way to do that. So first things first, what is XR? How many people have seen this continuum, the spectrum, right? Between the physical world and the digital world. And then within that spectrum, we have, I can see it, touch it, and interact with it. This is how I conceptualize it for myself. So that's real, right? And then over here, I see a representation of it. I can kind of touch it. That's the theory of it. That's the digital world, which really scares me when we start talking about the metaverse. I don't have those conversations yet. So here's an example I kind of wrote up a little bit to explain how I envision this continuum. So in the real world, here today, where my money's kind of short these days, right? Because I've got a daughter in college, a 13-year-old basketball phenom who has a really expensive shoe fetish, right? And I'll probably never actually buy the car of my dreams. And the car of my dreams is not a particular brand, a make or model, or it doesn't have a certain price, right? The car of my dreams is one that I can pay for outright. It doesn't come with a payment every month. That's the car of my dreams, right? Now, today that's not going to happen for me because I live in the real world, right? This is reality. I got bills to pay every month and I got crazy kids. So in the real world, I can't have that car. But in the virtual world, in that digital world, I can sit in that car every day, right? Depending on the software that I buy and maybe a special seat and a special steering wheel with all the haptics built in and, you know, really, really good solutions, I can sit in the car. I can feel what it feels like to drive it. I might even get a really good fan and feel the wind in my hair, right? But it's not real. However, I do get that experience. I get to kind of get a feel for it and say, oh, I like this, or I don't like this. This works for me, that doesn't work for me. And that's all good, right? It's all fine and great. Now, what have I learned from that experience? That's the question that keeps me up at night. Well, not at night most of the time. It just bugs me at work all the time. What do I learn from this experience? And that's what makes these kinds of decisions difficult for me when it comes to training and development and applying XR. It's cool, yes. Wouldn't it be cool if? Yes, it would. It would be cool. It would feel awesome. It would look good. It would be really expensive, right? And it would be fun, very engaging. But what do we learn? Okay, so how does learning happen anyway? These are a couple results from a Google search on how does learning happen. I just put in that question. Learning and development happens within the context of relationships, among children, et cetera, et cetera. You can read those if you like, but I'd like to ask you guys for a couple quick thoughts of how or when you feel learning happens. When do you think there's that magic time when something clicks and there's learning? What do you think? Anybody? In stories. So experiences, maybe stories, something that happened to you, something you heard, something somebody told you. Yeah. Learn from experience, right? What else? Micro-learning, absolutely. When you need it. This is how you learn best, when you can put it into practice right away, because I need it now. I'm going to learn because I'm going to do it now, right? Great. Anybody else?
How about new experiences?
New experiences. Yeah, who knows when those are going to happen, right?
That's where I learned something new.
Yeah, absolutely. You didn't expect it. Okay. Last one. Anybody else? What's that? Peer-to-peer learning. Yeah, what do your friends know? What are you going to learn from them? Or your colleagues, right? Absolutely. So my point to this is learning is fluid, right? A lot of us work in training and development, and we know that learning can happen anywhere, anytime, in any context, okay? For everyone. Everybody's going to learn differently at different times, in different environments, okay? Through different instruction, different experiences. Now, when we think about that and the fluidity of learning that we're talking about, think about how that's impacted when you try to create that inside of a virtual or digital environment, right? When we try to create learning, we want to focus all of these things, these instances that we talked about, right? We want to focus the experience. We want to focus the peers because you have a specific audience that you're focused on. We want to focus the time that we make that available, okay? We want to focus all of these things so that we can make sure we address our objectives and we meet those objectives with our audience. within the time that we are given and the space that we're given and the tools that we have, right? So in training and development, we're always working to narrow the focus down, right? To make it as specific and as concise as possible so that you can get the message across. So there's actual learning, right? So in normal training and development, we're focus, 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 dig in. Now you want to do it in a virtual environment, which opens up a whole nother world, okay? And a whole nother list of possibilities. So that's again, the difficulties that I'm having with it. This is how I learned to teach. We talked about ADDIE earlier. A lot of you are familiar with it. Those of you who know ADDIE, raise your hand. Once again, those of you who don't and you're interested and you've got some kind of project and learning to do, talk to some of the people that raise their hand, because you can start making some really good connections here today to help facilitate this process and make it a little bit easier. So this is ADDIE in a nutshell for me. Analysis is, what are we doing? What do we need to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Design, how are we going to do it? Development, let's do it, make it happen, okay? Implementation, did you see what we did? We put it here, we made it available then. We asked these people to take it, we're tracking it in this way. Evaluation, did we do it right? Right? Evaluation is a big deal. People talked about ROI in the first panel, if you weren't here to listen to that part. But, you know, money's a big deal. You know, it's not the only thing, it's not the biggest thing, but we're always, always tasked to quantify training and development, right? How do you prove your worth? And a lot of times numbers help you to do that. Numbers are some of the hardest things to come by for training. I'm sure all of you know that already. So analysis, what are we doing? Ask some of these very specific pointed questions, and I'm not training ADDIE today, so we're not going to go through this in too much depth, but just trying to fill our coffers with some good questions. What are we doing? Who are we doing it for? Why are we doing it? This is a really good question, I think, to front end your process with when it comes to training and development, especially if you're considering using some sort of XR solution. Why are you doing it? And then that follow-up question is, would XR fit here, right? It's a little more in design, but you could start thinking about that question here based on why you're doing it, okay? Where will your work be available, all right? Again, you got to think about some of your limitations when you think about where is it going to be available. So is it something you're putting in an LMS? Is it something that you want to deliver through an instructor, a facilitator? Do you want to do it live? Do you have to show real components or real things? We work on trucks. Our stuff is big. You know, we work with a lot of technicians. We want them jumping inside those trucks and tearing stuff apart. But it's really hard for me to pull a truck in everywhere that we want training to exist, right? Again, that's a good follow-up is, depending on where you want it, is it most appropriate in a virtual environment? And then, when will this be completed? When are you going to make this available? When does it need to get done? Is there some sort of other deadline that you're trying to butt up against? We always have product launches, features and stuff that are being launched, services that are being launched out to the dealer network, the customers and things like that. Do our internal employees need to know about these things? Sure they do. But a lot of times, you know, there's already a deadline or a launch plan before we even know what's happening. That could also really affect the type of solution that you create when it comes to training if you don't have enough time. All right, designing, how are we going to do it? The training, that is. How do we prepare the audience for what is coming? What are our overall objectives for training? And I've learned a lot with behavioral objectives. What do we want people to be able to do? What do we want them to do? Change behavior, change behavior, change behavior. How can we present content? What is our method? Is it going to be e-learning, ILT, virtual, etc.? Is XR an appropriate method? If so, how? What are you considering? And this is just, again, the part of the process where you start thinking and considering what your options are and what are the possibilities. You could also rule them out very early on in your process by doing this. Okay? What are your deliverables? How do we assess proficiency? Meaning, if we do this way, how do we measure proficiency at the end? Okay? If we build it this way, how do we test it? The lovely gentleman up here before me, Chris, was talking about if you're not testing, you're not training. I don't 100% agree with that statement. However, we do need to measure proficiency, and that's also a way to measure how well we're doing. How good is our training if nobody's using it or if it doesn't affect their behavior at all? Okay? And lastly, like I said, how will we evaluate? Development, let's do it. So it's time to build, create, develop your solutions. Here you need subject matter experts. You need people who know what they're doing to help guide you as you build processes or animations or whatever it is you're going to create that illustrates what it is they're supposed to be doing, the people that you're training, what you want them to learn how to do. Establish review cycles, build, whether it's in XR or wherever else, review and approve, build, review, and approve. So that should be a really quick process that you're going through all the time as you continue to work on your deliverable until it's done. And then, so that's my version, I guess, of build, review, and approve. It's rinse and repeat. Just keep doing it. Implementation, did you see what we did? Market your solution to your intended audience. Make other interested parties aware. So we talked about, a specific user base. There's always an audience that you're most directed towards. These are the people that you want to affect. This is the behavior that you want to affect. Now, there are other people that can really take up your charge and help in your process by marketing your program on your behalf, because they manage those people or they support those people who are in your audience. So you want them to see what you've done as well. You want to share all the wonderful things that you create to build this buzz for your audience, okay? Make sure your audience is aware. Marketing, notifications, LMS curriculum, and courses. Using your executives to push training solutions requiring completions and pilot if you can. So executive buy-in is a really big deal, especially when you're using these brand newfangled solutions like XR. So if you've got some executive somewhere, some sort of powerhouse who can give you the buy-in that you need, who can talk it up, who can share, here's why we're doing it this way. We chose XR because of this. We chose VR because of this. We choose AR. We can do that ourselves too as we introduce the program, but it's always nice to get buy-in from the executives because people should be following that trend from the top down. Okay. Evaluation, did we do it right? Did we hit the mark? Did we achieve the objectives? Did your audience learn what they needed to learn? So now, do they know what they need to know? And are they now able to do what they should be able to do? If not, you didn't hit the mark, right? You got to do it again. Okay. Let the brew breathe. Don't be too quick to fix based on early feedback. So this is something that I have to deal with a lot. I have to fight a lot. When we pilot a program, a lot of people feel like we pilot it today, and based on the comments we get, we change it tomorrow, and then we do it again, and then we get more comments, and then we do it again, and then we do, So it's this constant cycle of changing your content and your material until you feel like it's right or until people stop commenting. If we continue to make those changes, you're really not going to know if you're creating the effect that you want, if you're hitting the mark or meeting your objectives, because you're changing it too quickly. You have to let your content sit for at least a little while. Collect a good amount of information. Give it 3 months, give it 6 months, give it 12 months if you can. Okay, unless there's something grossly erroneous about the content that you've put out, which if you've got your SMEs and you did your A and your D in the front end, there shouldn't be, right? So if we've gone through that process, that methodology, and it doesn't have to match up with a methodology that's standard to training and development. It could just be, I ask these questions before I get started, and until I get all the answers, I don't move ahead. That's fine, okay? But you got to do some sort of due diligence before you actually start building these solutions, right? And then lastly, listen to your audience. Listen to them, let them talk, collect that feedback, and then find where there's consistency in the messaging. If it's with the experience, if it's with the content, if it's with the activities, if it's with the testing, okay, and the measurement. Your audience will help you figure out what you need to fix if you give them the time to do that, okay? Give them the time to give you their feedback, collect it, and then go through that to find where those consistent messages are, and that's where you target your changes later. Okay, so what does XR offer to training? That's a lot. Is this helpful so far? Does anybody care what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. All right, thank you, appreciate that. Just a couple things that I have found so far. So in 2017 was my first kind of foray into XR and trying to figure out how this was going to work for training and development. And back then, I knew absolutely nothing. And somebody said, hey, Amanda, wouldn't it be cool if? And I said, yeah, that would be cool, so let's do it. Not realizing, of course, that I have no idea what I'm doing. And I did not apply the methodology that I know. I just sort of jumped whole hog into something that I had no clue about. So when it came to the actual project and they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to create this digital truck model, and I want to allow our salespeople to walk around the truck and tour the product. We want them to see the new features, the enhancements that we've made through this new cycle when we launch this new product. And we want them to be able to do that virtually because we've got so many people coming through this launch event. There's no way everybody's going to be able to get inside of the truck. We've only got a couple of trucks. Let's enhance this experience by creating this virtual, this VR opportunity for the folks that don't actually get to jump in the truck, right? Great. It worked very well. People were really engaged. They loved it. It was great. Worked while we were there. We only had a couple headsets, but that's okay. No COVID then, so we just recycled and used it all day long. And it worked really, really well during the event, right? We had really grand plans during our planning. We said, oh, yeah, this experience is going to live on. They can use this in sales when they get back to their dealerships. Okay, which dealerships are buying these headsets? None of them. Okay, we're going to buy headsets for everybody. Every dealership's going to get headsets. They didn't, because we didn't realize how expensive that was going to be for us, right? We just had this really great plan. And although we did create a good solution and it was used and it was appreciated, it wasn't something that we could scale on the back end. It wasn't something that we got the value out of, right? So in the end, I feel like that project was a bust, you know? Now in the interim, it was also exhausting and extremely frustrating to me because remember I told you I had no idea what I was doing. So every question that came to me created 10 questions for me to other people and other teams to help gather assets, answer questions. I didn't realize that, you know, when you use CAD drawings, there's all these other systems and solutions. I don't even speak those languages, guys. So it was a really, really tough process to go through, only to find that, you know, after 30 days, my solution was no good. So I learned a lot during that process 5 years ago, and that's why I've been kind of really hesitant to take that leap again, you know, in the past several years. But now we've got, you know, I've learned quite a bit more. There's a lot more scalable solutions available. I'm understanding the technology, the software, the tools even to build this stuff in, a whole lot more. And I know much more about how to use XR to assist and facilitate training instead of trying to replace what we already have with an XR solution. So for XR, here's some of the things that I found that it will offer. Application, the difference between theory and practice. This should still be practice, but you can't build using another model or method. This should be, what I mean by that is, if you can create an e-learning solution in Storyline that will explain what you need it to explain, show what you need it to show, test the skills or assess the knowledge, then do it in Storyline because that's the best environment. If it's something that you can do in less time, for less money, with less resources, less learning curve, do what you know. It's going to work, right? Because it works today, okay? XR is to enhance these experiences, right? To build on these experiences, to create an experience that you cannot do in another digital environment, okay? Practice, practice, practice. This I always see, and this is how I intend to use, I'm hoping more so AR, but I keep hearing that that's probably not the best way to go today. But for one of my projects that I need to accomplish right now is for our truck technicians. We need to create learning that allows them to work on these very, very large truck components like engines, transmissions, and things like that. They have tasks to like do disassembly, diagnostics, reassembly, those sorts of things. And we don't want them working on customers' trucks, right? If you didn't bring your truck in for an engine disassembly, nobody ever does that, right? Unless it's absolutely necessary. We can't do that every day. You can't practice that at home, you know what I mean? But in a virtual or a digital environment, you could do it all day long. You can do it as many times as you want to. You can break it as many times as you want to until you reach proficiency, sorry. And we can determine what that proficiency is. We can test that proficiency in that environment, and we're not destroying people's trucks, right? So that's a pretty good solution that I think we can definitely build and use and scale. We can use it and apply it to our entire audience. We've got thousands of technicians, and there's not enough hours in the day or days in the year for us to train all of them as completely as we could if we had more scalable options like these. Failure without destruction, as I said, real-time help and instruction at a distance. So this is more of that remote support, not necessarily for a technician who's on the job, but maybe we can create some learning instances where we can have a remote facilitator, and maybe there's a group of learners that are remote as well, different locations. I'm not really sure about that one either, but there's a possibility here when it comes to XR and AR availability. And then proficiency testing and testing at a distance. This is one thing that we really are considering again as well, because we don't have the time for everyone to travel into our training centers to, go through some sort of physical manual testing on a real component, put it all back together, and then let that second person come and take it all apart again. And, it's just not an appropriate use of our time when we can facilitate this digitally or virtually. Okay. So, in summary, these are just my random thoughts. Some of the other things, there was another question earlier about ROI. Does anybody have any interesting comments or thoughts about measuring ROI using XR or AR? You got some?
Well, certainly it's the biggest hill I have to climb right now. And, I think there's a couple of flavors of that challenge. One is that leadership and finance people in general are looking for anecdotal, traceable data that, hey, look, I drilled 1,000 holes using this new drill bit, and I saved, 18 seconds per hole, and I can look through the math. XR doesn't really provide those easily monetizable benefits at this point, because, there is not that much history surrounding its use, and certainly not that much that involves lots of metric gathering. So, I find myself, when I'm trying to put together XR business cases, to talking about things that are much less tangible.
Yeah.
Much more soft, evanescent, kind of squishy, right?
Kind of squishy. The whole concept is kind of squishy.
Sure.
Yeah, agreed. And so I'd love to hear, what's going on with you guys. If you want to send me a message, I know I'm running out of time, or I'm out of time probably. But ideas about how to prove, that ROI. It's not always quantifiable. It's not always about money. We know that, but sometimes it's time to proficiency. Sometimes it's saving on tearing up customers' engines, as opposed to how many engines we might lose a year when a technician who's green, messes up and destroys somebody's truck, right? Maybe those are the kind of numbers or data that we can put together. And certainly there's a lot more solutions now with some of the AR solutions, the apps that are being created, and a lot of the data that's being collected today. So there's not necessarily historical data inside of that solution, but there is historical data potentially that was collected prior to. So if you've had X amount of failures before you introduced, now you've got some data to compare it to in this environment. So any final comments or questions or anything? Anyone? Sorry? They can ask you some questions after? Yeah, sure. And you can email me or message me on LinkedIn or whatever you like. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your event.